You're listening to the Big Three of B2B Leadership podcast with Mike Faherty, where world-class business leaders share their secrets for personal, organizational, and market growth. Gain powerful insights from industry leaders that have been tested by the fire.
Well, hello and welcome to the Big Three of B2B Leadership, where we invite industry leaders to share their insights on personal and professional development, developing and maintaining operational excellence in an organization, and of course, expanding your company's position in the marketplace. My name is Mike Faherty. I'm your host today. Today, I'll have the pleasure of being joined by Mike Dowhan. Mike, did I say that right?
Dowhan, yes, very close.
My bad. So Mike Dowhan. So Mike is the president and founder of Bedrock Sales Strategies. They're powered by Sales Acceleration, which a lot of people are familiar with, a really well-respected firm in the fractional sales leadership business. Mike specializes in working with sales strategy, leadership, and execution. He's a fractional outsourced VP of sales, and he builds high-performing sales teams by developing those winning go-to-market strategies, of course, coaching and establishing repeatable processes that drive consistent results. I'm excited to talk about sales leadership and business growth today with Mike. Please, Mike, welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Really appreciate it, Mike. I've been looking forward to this. This has been a long time coming. So, we may get a little nerdy about sales, but that's the point here. I'm passionate about the topic. It's what I love to do, and I'm really excited to chat with you today.
Well, that's awesome. Thanks, Mike. Yeah, we will get a little nerdy. This podcast we are always talking about business growth in one way or another, but most of my guests are usually on the marketing side. So I'm excited to get a chance to really dig into the sales side, which is kind of where I came up in business. So I know you and I share a lot of similar experiences and thoughts around that. So this will be a fun discussion. So I love to get into the origin stories. We don't have to spend a lot of time here, but I'm always curious. So went back and looked. Your undergraduate degree is in engineering management systems.
Correct.
But it seems like you worked immediately in financial services and fintech sales, really from the start. Talk to me about how you go from engineering management into sales and fintech.
Well, so my trajectory is a little bit, not as abbreviated as that. So I did actually start as a developer on Wall Street, writing bond trading systems, and that's really where I got my start in fintech. Sales was a little bit later in the career, and it's certainly a progression. And something that, I didn't script up at the beginning, but really it was kind of identifying, what am I best at? What am I good at? And what do I like doing? And the convergence of that ended up being in sales. The trajectory, some technical work, some programming, some consulting, some more education. But that really got me into really identifying where I could leverage all the skills that I had, all the experiences that I had, and match it with my passion, which ended up being sales of all things. I didn't expect it up front, but when you find it and it really feels natural and really feels good.
Yeah, I think, I don't believe, this is one of these great debates and that we can have, right? Is, are salespeople, made or are they born that way? I'm from the school of thought that anyone can be a salesperson. It's a set of skills that can be learned. And I think there's a great example. I've seen working in technology, I've seen great salespeople come out of the technical side all the time. And I've seen other really successful salespeople that would be lost in a more technical role. That's just not where their skill sets are. I think there's a place for both types of people to be successful in technology sales. And I don't think it takes one or the other, but it does require a few, unique things and empathy and problem solving and a number of other skills that I'm sure you look for when you're building teams. But it is interesting. I'm always interested in where people come from and how they land in this sales world. It's always kind of cool. So talk about that transition, into the fractional sales leadership and kind of what is a fractional VP of sales?
Sure, absolutely. So my transition really just came about, after soul searching again, right? Lots of nights, weekends, constantly on the road or constantly really, trying to hit that quarter end, hit that year end. And, having that commitment, that certainly does take a lot out of you, but you learn a lot. And, you think about what shapes a salesperson, right? It's skill, it's empathy, and it's desire, and all those things kind of come together to form who you are and what you want to be when you grow up. And I feel I found what I wanted to be when I grew up, and that was really to apply the principles of sales, the study, the learnings, and sort of what sales is all about, into the ability to develop that within other companies, to help coach and guide those that are just not aware of what sales is. We know what sales is supposed to do and what we want from sales, but how do you go about doing it? And what are the mechanics of it? I mean, you can take raw talent and you'll get some great results. But if you take raw talent and you hone the discipline and the trade of sales, and it is a trade, it can be learned, like you said, but there are good ways to do it. There are effective ways of doing it. And when you meet talent and know-how, then you really got something special. And my desire was always to be able to coach and teach. And I like to be able to present topics that I'm passionate about to those that are not aware, and then really drive immediate impact. The way I could be most impactful really was to start my practice and apply that discipline across multiple owners, but multiple business owners, where I get the diversity of both running a sales organization, building the sales organization, coaching, developing, leading, and really seeing the results. And not just from the sales itself, but the main results of giving hope to business owners and really making sure that they can achieve the goals that they want to achieve, because they're not focusing on something that they're not as skilled in. Me being able to come in and take that ownership and alleviate the pressure of what do I do next and how am I going to do this? Hey, you know what? I'm here. I'll come take that off your plate, and we'll work together on it. But you can at least have the comfort of knowing that it's in good hands, and then the business can focus on what it's best at. It's really rewarding, and just one of the best decision that I've made on a professional basis.
That's awesome. I can imagine the opportunity to get more cycles, right? For someone who really likes to make an impact and learn, but also share their knowledge. If you join an organization as the head of sales, you're making at least a few years of a commitment to that organization to really drive long-term change there. But as a fractional sales leader, I mean, you can really come in 6 months, have a massive impact, and then do it for 2 or 3 or 4 different organizations at the same time, giving you the scale and the ability to iterate and learn even faster on the behalf of your clients.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and you bring in, what a fractional VP of sales brings in is all the experience from a, seasoned institutional enterprise level type of organizational sales leader, and can bring that to any size business. And it's the kind of leadership that every business would love, but not every business can afford. And many businesses can't afford them, right? Unless you're, one of the bigger players. And so being able to tap that experience, it allows me as a leader to be very effective and efficient, and staying in a swim lane, which is to develop, build, and execute on the sales function. And that is very beneficial for both client and for me. And like you mentioned, being able to do that and get those repetitions over and over, what I like is some of the forensics, right? Of digging in and let's understand what we're trying to accomplish as an organization, and put the right structure around it, put the right people in the right seat, pay them appropriately. And we can talk at length about that. That's probably a whole other series about, appropriate compensation for motivation, but for career development. And, we'll talk about the people aspect, but really then how, making sure that you find the right formula that you can then repeat and grow and scale. And I think a lot of businesses have tried various strategies, and maybe have tried to scale various strategies and find out that they don't scale, and have really just ended up a little bit lost. And the beauty of being, fractional is to be able to apply that discipline in an affordable way and a very efficient and effective way. It's motivating for everybody. So, certainly an area that is growing, And all fractional leadership is really out there. Fractional controllers, you got fractional marketing, of course. Fractional HR. These are resources that companies can tap to get experts to be effective quickly, and make sure they're on the right path the first time.
So what do you see as the biggest challenge that B2B technology companies face today as it relates to sales? Just kind of broadly.
A lot of times there is the organizational structure can be very challenging. And a lot of that is sourced from maybe not understanding the product market fit. So I'm kind of going to back up, right? Because you'll see a symptom somewhere, right? And the symptom is always going to have some sort of root cause, some fundamental root cause that has set the organization on a path of maybe not as successful as it could have been. Some businesses even on the path to not being successful at all. And so really thinking about the fundamental structure of the business needs to be aligned along what the business's value proposition is. Who cares about that value proposition? And now we're kind of talking your language, right, Mike? We're talking value proposition and target personas and segments and things like that. But it's very important, right? And that's why you and I get along so well, because we understand the overlap and we understand the trajectory and the handoff. And building the right organization then is going to lead us to attracting the right people to execute on a sales strategy that is effective for the clients and the clients who care. And case in point, if you're a transactional business, you're not going to do as well with an enterprise long sales cycle rep who is used to opening multiple doors and 18-month sales cycles and bringing all the constituents together for decisions over months and months of time. You need sales and you need somebody transactional, and vice versa. The transactional rep does different things. They have different skill sets than the enterprise rep who's going to take a longer time. So it's so vital to make sure that you've got the right structure. We talked about then the right position, right? Is it transactional? Is it long sales cycle? Then go get your person. Because once you know what you want them to do and what you want them to accomplish, we can build a better profile about what the success criteria are. Then we can go get our superstar. Then we look at, okay, you mentioned empathy, grit for sure. Somebody that likes to solve problems. Sales is problem solving in a consultative way. They need to be very coachable. Coachability is, you can snuff that out. Interview tip, number one here. Let's look for opportunities to see if somebody's coachable. You could even pose a problem to somebody and change the dynamics, give them corrective feedback on the spot and say, hey, let's do it again. Does the person learn? Does the person adapt? Does the person understand and take coaching? Those are so important because things change. You have ideas for how your business is going to grow. You have your ideas for how your sales are going to flow. But what if something pivots? And what if something changes? How adaptable and coachable is the person for a change in direction or a change of marketplace? Those are super important. And finally, passion. I don't necessarily care what you're passionate about, but be passionate about something, because I'm going to get your energy from that, right? Here I am talking, I'm passionate about this topic and I'm a mile a minute, but that's what I want to hear. And that's what I want to see in an interview right away. Once you get hit on somebody's passion, they light up, you see who they truly are. Now let's hope they're passionate about what your company does. Get those two together. I think you've got, the makings of something special.
So is there a killer question? Is there the, Mike's killer question that you like to ask a salesperson in the interview that always gives you some really useful insight?
Well, I have two of them because I already kind of gave.
Most people who've hired a lot of salespeople have their one or two questions, and I'm just curious if you'd share one of yours.
Yeah, so the passion one gets us conversing, right? What are you passionate about, right? There's no wrong answer to that. And if the candidate can't come up with that, then I'm struggling now because I gave the candidate a question that has no wrong answer and they've gotten it wrong. If you can't come up with something there. So that's number one screener. The other one I like is, what do you feel is the role and the unique responsibility of sales in the organization? What are you uniquely qualified to do as a salesperson that nobody else in the company is skilled at or versed at. And that gives us more discussion points, because what it does is then it helps us understand, does the candidate know what the role of sales is? Are they going to stray away from what their swim lane is? And that's okay, right? We want to help out. But do you know what only you and only you can do? Because that's what I want you to accomplish. And it also gives us the ability to talk about, okay, well, what's your process like? What's your day look like? What's your output like? How resilient are you? What happens when you get hung up on? What happens when you lose a deal? What happens in the 9th hour? Something happens, right? It gives me the ability to navigate and ask all those questions that would seem like an interrogation if we didn't lead up with a particular question. And very relevant, that whole line of questioning, that whole approach is very much how I would want somebody to approach a prospect. I don't want an interrogation or an inquisition when a sales rep goes into one of a prospect. You have a list of questions that you want to get through. And I know, Mike, you do too, right? You got a list of questions you want to get through on this podcast, but we're going to get there and we're going to navigate there because we're going to make it conversational. And there are ways of doing that don't have somebody feel like they're in an interview or an interrogation. That's a very effective way. And you can tease that out by not just going line by line. Maybe one of those 2 lead-in questions really helps.
Yeah, isn't it interesting that the sales or the interview for a salesperson is the most similar experience to what that person will actually do in their day-to-day job, right? So if you interview a customer service manager, the interview might be slightly different than what their day-to-day would look like. But as a salesperson, an interview is a sales conversation at its core, right? And so I'm always interested in does the candidate approach it that way, and have they thought out a plan for how they want that call to go? Even as the interviewee or the candidate, do they have a plan? Like, do they have prepared questions? Is there a theme that they're trying to reinforce through their responses? Are they trying to communicate something clearly to them, to the person interviewing them? And it's just interesting how many salespeople don't approach it that way. And for me, that's almost a red flag. Like, I would like to see you come in here with a plan to win this meeting, right? To win this interview.
Or at least know what your outcome is. What is your projected outcome? Is it to get the next interview? Is it to get the job? Is it to learn more information? And I'll ask, what was your prepared outcome? What was your ideal outcome from this interview? And it tells you a little bit something about expectation setting too. But you mentioned red flags. Well, here's a question that you can pose even before the interview that helps you weed out some of the superstars from folks that are not really interested. I don't send reminders for interviews. I won't. You're a salesperson. We set a meeting, we set a time. You show up if you're interested. If you want the deal, show up. I don't make it difficult, but I don't spoon feed and I don't send tons of reminders, because I've had many salespeople not show up for interviews and I don't want them. And that's okay, right? I want to find that out ahead of time. Are you organized? Do you know how to navigate the organizational structure? Do you know how to get a meeting set up on somebody's calendar and make sure, are you confirming to me, right? You're the salesperson, right? I want to see that ahead of time. So, some folks may disagree, and I've had some heated arguments with folks in HR and other disciplines, but don't send a reminder. See what happens to your candidate pool and see if that maybe gets you a better quality candidates coming through, because you're, like you said, you're kind of giving them things to do on the job before they even get the interview.
Along that same line, one of the questions that I've always asked that will have a massive impact on how the rest of the meeting will go is, what did you do to prepare for this meeting? I'll just ask point blank, tell me about what you did to prepare for this meeting today. And they better have an answer, and they better have put some work in. It doesn't take a ton of time, but if they haven't given a half an hour to read through the website or to read some, I don't care if they went to, glassceiling.com or whatever and read, people who worked there before, whatever they did, I want to know Did you reread the job interview? Did you make notes? Did you prepare some questions like what was it?
Right.
The number of people that when I coach salespeople who are trying to get hired, the thing that I tell them to do is always go into that interview with at least two really thoughtful questions that they want to ask. That does not include what's a day in the life and what's the career growth path, for this position. All those are fine questions. If you want to know the answer to them, ask them. But I need at least two really thoughtful questions. The other thing is make sure you know how that company makes money.
Right.
Like, do you understand what they're doing there and what they sell and how they make money selling it? Is it a software? Is it a product? Is it sold in projects? Is it long-term agreements? Is it, how do they make money? What do they do? And I boil it down to how do they make money, not what do they do. What do they do is a big question, but how do they make money really gets to the key, elements and the essence of it. So yeah, that's cool. Some good stuff there. So let's talk about sales leaders though, right? So we've been talking about hiring these sales guys who are as we know, they're the backbone of most successful organizations, just a really well-run sales team. Or at least maybe that's a biased sales person's perspective on it. But let's talk about sales leaders. So what do you think makes a great sales leader?
So there definitely a sales leader needs to be constantly challenging their team, and not just leaving them to fend for themselves, but coaching and guiding as need be. Because what ends up happening without challenging salespeople, they lose their edge, they lose interest, they don't feel like anybody's investing in them, they get left on an island, they start going rogue, right? There's a whole bunch of things that happen. But with the challenge concept, what you're doing is you're investing in even folks who are superstars because they need it, right? There are various ways to invest in your team without just promoting them and paying them more money. Yes, you can give them external training as opportunities, right? Maybe a leadership seminar or something. But the sales leader needs to constantly understand how to challenge each individual just enough so that they don't feel that there's these goals are unattainable, but really saying, hey, look, we need to accomplish this very difficult goal. And I'm going to challenge you both on your goal and in personal development and career development, right? 3 different areas. I'm going to make some challenges for that individual to make sure that they're continuing to sharpen, even while they're trying to attain, the revenue target and the sales target. Sometimes the ability to hit that target is being limited by one of those capacities, either just not having enough skill or enough expertise, not having enough personal, maybe the personal development's getting in the way, or just not having a bar set high enough for them to be hungry. The hunger of a salesperson doesn't have to be ravenous, dog eat dog type of hunger. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is every salesperson needs a bar. They need to know what that bar is so they can overachieve it. That's the person you want on your team. The leader needs to then be able to understand where to set those bars and all those facets of career and personal and revenue, so that we keep that salesperson hungry and striving to do better. And then the individual can take responsibility for developing him or herself, but also then consulting with the leader to get the guidance and the mentorship and the coaching that is needed. So it becomes a two-way street, right? Because what as a leader, we set a trajectory and an objective that on the surface right now does not seem easily achieved. And you want your team level to work together to try to achieve that, but also to come to you for counsel and guidance. That's where the coachability comes in. That's where the feedback loops come in. That's where the role play comes in, right? Hey, let's just, we got some ideas on this deal. Let's kind of go back and forth. You want your team coming to you for that, rather than, well, I didn't hit my number and, I don't know what I'm going to do about it, right? We're constantly challenging. Yes, we measure because we need to know what the bar is. We need to measure because we need to, know that we're going to have a path to success. But we're talking about the personal aspect of that. I find that as a leader, It continues to, energize me because it gives me value as a leader who's been, through the ropes and can turn and pay it forward, if you will, really, and guide and coach others to have the same or even, a more successful trajectory. That gives me leadership empowerment, and it gives me satisfaction as a leader.
So another one of the fun debates is, if you haven't done it yourself, you can't lead people to do it. This whole idea that, should your sales manager be your top performing salesperson because they've proven that they know how to do it and know what's possible. The other side of it is, the idea that, sometimes the best players don't make the best coaches. That's sort of the counter argument to it. What are your thoughts on that sort of age-old debate on is the top performer the next leader, or is it something else?
So the top performer is not always the next leader. So that's my stance there. I think to be a successful sales leader, you have to have done the job or had some really good training or on the job training. Because here's what happens, right? The leadership component pulling out sales is very similar, right? You're managing people, you're taking accountability, you're guiding the team. You're making sure that you apply as much leverage as you can to be successful without overextending your budget, of course. That's leadership, right? And having the bigger picture and communicating that and translating that to your team so that the path and everyone's rowing the same direction for the same reasons. Now, when you throw sales on there, well, when your sales rep comes to you and says, hey, how do I unstick this deal? They won't call me back. Hey, how do I, everyone's asking for like price reductions. What do I do? If you haven't been trained enough in the sales aspect, then the ability to coach and guide the skill set is what is going to be lacking. So having at least some sales experience is going to make you a beneficial leader, because if you're a great leader, you can apply the skill set and you can translate it, along with the context. There are many leaders and many sales leaders that were appointed sales leaders, right? Marketing leaders that became sales leaders that just don't know as much about the sales discipline and the trade to be as successful as they could be, but they could be strong leaders of a strong salesperson. You can have, at least the skill set and the passion and the mentoring, kind of converging together. The fundamental issue with taking your top performer and becoming a sales manager is that who is going to train the salesperson to be a manager? Most of the time, the sales manager is appointed, but who is guiding and training and teaching? Well, right, that's something that I would do, right? So I would come into an organization and we would look at the team and say, well, I really like this individual. This individual is on track to be a manager. She wants to be a manager. She's really qualified and good at it and really good at sales. I don't know how to extract her, and take my top producer and turn her into a manager. But what we don't want to do is set her out on her own, because the workflow is different. You're putting together forecasts and you're looking at pipeline and you're checking analytics and conversion rates, reporting that up to senior leadership or to the executive teams. It's a different workflow. You can't just go sell your way out of a problem. Now you've got to go and work with the team and motivate them appropriately. And hopefully you've set their goals appropriately and you've set their direction and their metrics appropriately for them to be successful. It's a different lens. And it's okay to not be a sales manager ever. There are plenty of very high performing, very successful, and very happy salespeople that maybe got a taste of it and said, I don't want that again, right? And there's others of us that couldn't wait to get in sales management because we had the view and the perspective. I just needed the training. And so having great mentors and great sales leaders to train is vital for that success. It builds, the credibility. It builds experience. It allows somebody to have trial by fire, but also an accountability partner and somebody that can kind of help, work through it rather than leaving someone to their own devices. Sales management is not easy and there's not a lot of books on it. You can read, but you got to have a mentor. You got to have practice. That's for sure.
Yeah, I've seen, and I'm sure you have too. One of the best ways to ruin a sales organization is to take that top guy or gal, right? Out of the team, out of the individual contributor role, put them in a management role. You've lost their productivity and you've put them in a management role and you didn't support them. And then they're leading a group of people who are not nearly as talented or as skilled as they were. And they don't know how to get the most out of them. So their go-to move is take over the deal because that's all they know how to do is to run a deal. And then they burn themselves out because they work 3 times harder than they should.
Right.
And they miss their goals because they can't do it all by themselves. And then they leave. And the first call from a recruiter, it says, I've got something that's just marginally better, or even not quite as good, but I can go back to an individual contributor role again and do what I'm best at. They're gone, right? And so that move is such a critical move, and it can really set an organization back if it's not really managed well. I think bringing in someone like you, or even just an executive coach or someone to run alongside that person for the first 6 months to help them understand what they need to be doing and how to do it and what's expected of them and how to lead and how to coach, and to help them establish boundaries on, I won't take this thing over. I'm not taking it off your plate and putting it on mine. When that might be their instinct to do that, can be really, really valuable. And that person might end up being, a critical part of your team for the next 10 years if you can just handle that transition the right way. Maybe they have all the skills, so they have the empathy and the will and the grit and all the other things that we want out of these great employees, but there's a skills gap, from a lack of experience from a leadership standpoint. You can help them close that gap. It can make a big difference, right?
Yeah, and I'll tell you, what gets surfaced from that is, well, maybe the organizational structure of the sales team is not correct. Why is that person the strongest contributor? That person may not even be the strongest contributor. That person could be sitting on all the accounts that have been built up for the last 4 or 5 years collecting checks, right? And so we've set up then everybody else that comes in the door for failure, because we have these huge goals to say, hey, you have to act like, Stephen or Stephanie or whomever, right? And nobody can achieve that. Well, because they were set up to fail based on your organizational structure, and then maybe wrong people, wrong seat. And so, it all kind of trickles down, and being thoughtful about career pathing, always, like, super important to me, super vital. Like I lead with career pathing, because you then build your organization around growing and developing internally. But you also know which pieces you can bring in from the outside, because you know what the path needs to look like. But what it does, it allows you to bring in folks early on where they don't need to know as much, and they can be very successful later on in the organization, while also providing opportunities for advancement for your star performers, depending on what trajectory and path that is. So the career path isn't just, well, every time I hire, I'm going to hire a sales development rep, and then I'm going to promote them to rep and then a manager, and that's my career path. I mean, it's a little bit more than that, right? Because our superstar, what is his or her path? And then what is the organization around and behind that person? We may not have that right, especially once you pull it out. And you'd rather be thoughtful about it before you unplug your star contributor, and now all of a sudden you're scrambling because the rest of the pieces aren't in line. So it definitely works both ways, which is why I like to always have that career pathing lens on things, so that I know what happens if this piece moves or changes or needs to shift. What happens to everything else that I have expectations on, because I've been thoughtful and mindful about what all those pieces are, how the organization fits together, what we need everybody to accomplish, their net contribution to revenue. Is it 50% from existing clients? Is it 80%? Is it 20%? That's going to very much alter who you put into place and when you can move them, and what it takes to actually move somebody into their career.
So if we were to look at smaller organizations, that makes, look, I've talked about this, I ran sales teams at HP and Compaq and big companies like that. And you've been in big organizations like that in the past as well. And when you talk about career pathing, that's a relatively easy discussion whenever you've got big organizations like that. But let's drill this down to that smaller business, right? They've got they've got a VP of sales or a sales director. They've got 5 or 6 salespeople on the team. And that's probably all it's going to be. It'll grow incrementally, maybe over the next few years. Maybe they add a couple reps, or maybe they split the team in two, maybe if they get once they reach some critical mass. But they're never going to have 100-person sales organization with all the different functions, right? So how do you talk to them about career pathing and growth and career planning whenever that's kind of what when a business owner or a CEO that's what his organization looks like?
That's a great question, Mike. So certainly, you're not always going to have, stages, right, and levels of career advancement. But let's think about career. It isn't just vertical, right? I mean, you know that you're growing when your sphere of influence expands. That is a growth pattern. That is a growth opportunity. Sphere of influence, responsibilities, right? So you can put titles and labels around that, and that's fine, right? And sometimes it's important so that people can see there's a distinction. Like, I have a career path, and I know what's next, right? Because I'm going to get this responsibility, I'm going to get ownership of that, or I'm going to lead this. Those are very clear. It does go down to what is the business's goals, and what we're doing with 5 salespeople, with 3. Will we accomplish the business's goals year over year if that stays true? So it depends. Are we in growth mode? Do we want to grow 10% a year, 30, 40% a year? And what is it going to take for us to get there? And so really the very fundamental step in putting the sales organization together is understanding what the endpoint is. So my sales plan, it's a GPS, right? A sales plan is a GPS. And what do you need? You need a starting point. You need an ending point. And then we're going to build the path to getting there. But if you don't have that endpoint, you don't know where you're trying to get, then it's very difficult to say what it takes to get there. Once we start setting endpoints and goals for the business, now we can look back and we can say, okay, based on what we have now and our historical abilities to grow revenue, what is it going to take for us to hit this new milestone? Oh, well, everyone's going to have to sell twice as much as they did, and I've got no more leads coming in, and I have no new business. Okay, well, that tells us something, right? So we're starting to formulate and frame out where the business and how the business is going to get there. And then when we think about, okay, framing out how the business is going to get there, we start carving out the organization. And then we start carving out how much should each individual at a certain level then be responsible for, and what channels should they be responsible for. So I could have new reps coming in that are going to have a smaller quota. As the quotas increase, salaries will increase, but responsibilities may increase. You might be starting to handle larger accounts. You might start handle channel partnerships. You might start working with VC firms, right, to look at other opportunities, as a partner. So your responsibilities could change as a salesperson, or you become more involved in go-to-market. Become more involved with marketing. You do the lead scoring. I mean, there's other ways to expand responsibilities for folks on the sales organization that are commensurate with where the business is trying to go and how the organizational structure needs to adapt to get there. It's not always, just keep the same 5 people and just more and more out of them. We need to look at the responsibility, what we need everyone to accomplish in a reasonable fashion, and then put the trajectory together of, okay, your responsibilities are now here, here, and here. Well, remember, we're still stretching everybody. We're still challenging everybody. We're growing and developing them as professionals, as salespeople. There's opportunity to grant within an organization because you're growing and developing the personal skill set, the professional skill set, and their revenue, which really translates to compensation and success metrics.
Do you think we ask salespeople to do too much? Do you think we're asking them to do too much?
In the smaller organizations, they are being asked to do too much generally, right? It's roles and responsibility overlap. So let's get back to what a salesperson is uniquely qualified to do. They're uniquely qualified to understand and diagnose what a business challenge might be that an owner or a prospect has, to understand the goals of that business and how our organization might achieve to help fit those goals, to get the right people in the room, right? Get the decision makers and understand, that the decision maker is not always the approver, right? Someone would say, hey, I'm making the decision on it. Well, I always ask, okay, so are you signing the contract? Well, no. Bill's going to sign the contract. Okay, well, all right. So mental note, decision maker, yes, you're going to make the call about whether we go with vendor A or vendor B, but Bill's still pulling the strings. And if Bill used to work at vendor A and not us, I may not have a chance in this. We need to know these things. Sales understands how to do that. And so, yes, it's not just, they're the only ones that can get that information, but they do it in a consultative way and a non-threatening way. Think about, I guess, a real estate broker. That's kind of the consummate salesperson as far as like my lens on sales. I don't know how to buy a house, right? I want to buy a house. I don't know how to do it, but a real estate broker does, but they don't have a house to sell me, right? They don't own a house. They own a relationship with somebody who has a house. So they're my guide. They consult with me. They bring me resources that I need to help make the transaction work. They give me articles, maybe a coffee or at least a ride in their fancy Lexus when we go look at houses, something, recipes, whatever it is, but they're guiding me and they're bringing me through the buying process. And, that's what salespeople need to be able to do. They need to understand what the journey is for the client and the prospect, what they need to go through, their steps, their stages, their approval processes, their people, their timelines. And they the great salespeople understand that is what they're qualified to do.
So on the flip side of that, what are some of the things that you see organizations put on salespeople that should not be there, and that you think that they're misusing those resources when they do it? Is there a couple things that come to mind?
Well, yeah, like when I call you and I have sales reps that are responsible for generating their own leads. That's challenging. Now, I will do it. I will have salespeople do outbound prospecting, but I want it to be very focused, very targeted, and as a supplement and not the main revenue stream, because they're not great at it and they don't always have the resources and the patience, right? The success factor, the conversion ratios are low. It's not rewarding business. And so I admire you and your team, Mike, for, going through and slugging through a lot of that, but you're good at it, right? And so having salespeople do that, I think it's okay for salespeople to work on product market fit to a certain extent. I don't want a salesperson leading it. I don't want the salesperson in charge of the go-to-market. I can work with that, but I would, very much like to collaborate with a marketing leader on, okay, here's our go-to-market. I need product, I need marketing, I need finance, I need sales, and I need, COOs, right? We need to be in there. Let's deliberate and figure out who does what. Once, a lot of those things get put on sales because they're just out there, the ones talking, we ask too much from them. Putting things in the CRM, not too much to ask. So I'll say it, but let's be reasonable, right? I don't want activities for activity's sake. I want activities that are meaningful. And so as putting a strategic plan together, I do want certain milestones to be understood and recorded. Now, if it takes you one phone call to get to that milestone, great. If it takes you 10 phone calls to get there, I don't really care that you put 10 activities of how I tried in there, because actually if it takes you 10 phone calls, we're probably going to have more of a career development question than a different kind of question about your effectiveness. Right. But yeah, those things need to happen. We put a lot of burden on salespeople to produce their own materials, to do their own presentations, to do proposals, to do SOWs. Like these things, if we can scale them or if we can get outside resources for them, allows a salesperson to go back to doing what they're, uniquely qualified to do. And nobody else in the organization is really good at that, except maybe the owner. And the owner is acting in a sales capacity, right? And not all owners are great at it, but they've done it before. But nobody else can do it. Product managers couldn't and shouldn't be doing those types of meetings and those types of consultative guidance of the client journey. So the more we can hone in, the better. And I know this is ideal, and I know I'm speaking from the sales pedestal. But if I craft out what is let the salesperson sell, what does that mean? A lot of what I just described means, hey, sales on sales activities, let's eliminate the non-selling activities as much as possible, and you're going to see productivity and they're going to sell more. It's just, they have to. You only have so many hours in a week, and if they're not selling in those hours that they're working, then they're not bringing in money.
Yeah, there's a couple different ways to go with that. I mean, I know you, especially walking in organizations where sales is not always performing well. That's a lot of the reasons why someone might engage you is hey, we see there's an opportunity here to improve, and we're not sure exactly where to start. So they bring in an expert, right? But whenever you get involved in that kind of a conversation, one of the things that I would imagine you would want to do, and I certainly have done when I've taken over teams, is let's take all of the excuses off the table. And one of the first things that you're going to hear from the sales team is, well, you ought to see all the stuff I have to do that's not selling, right? And I'm sure you hear that almost every single time, right? And it's a lot of times it's absolutely true. Whenever you get in there and start watching the sales motion, you see, oh, wow, so you're doing that, you're doing this, you're doing that. And you talk about that whole sales enablement part of the business where we're creating proposals and creating statements of work and creating contracts and really, in some cases, writing those documents from scratch. They're not even templatized yet, right? And people are just literally sitting down with a blank sheet of paper and starting from scratch in some cases, which is first of all, it's not. When you start asking a salesperson to do that, you have got them completely out of their comfort zone, and they're probably not producing high quality work in that area. And if they are producing high quality work, it's taking them 2 or 3 times longer than it would take someone who that's what to do it for.
Yeah, because they could do it, but they're not great at it. And it takes them 2 to 3 times long. But the ones that dive in and say, well, it would just be faster if I did it myself. Because by the time I explain it to somebody, I might as well just do it. But it's still taking them 2 or 3 times longer than if they taught somebody to fish.
And the other part that you mentioned, which I think is again one of my pet peeves, talk about getting me on a soapbox, is because I'm with you. I started my career at a technology company that really embraced CRM, and we were using Siebel, and when Tom Siebel was the rep, and so there was, I've been using a CRM application from day one, and first of all, I'm blown away how many organizations haven't even gotten there yet, which is just blows my mind every single time. But the ones who do, what's even more frustrating is the ones who have implemented that kind of a software to help enable the sales teams, and then either A, don't hold them accountable for putting information in the system, or B, almost even worse, they hold them accountable for putting information into the system and then haven't invested the time to figure out how to get the information out of the system that they want to see. Right. So they say, when you're done entering all your information, I want you to go over to a spreadsheet. I want you to also give me another report on a weekly basis that tells me what I really want to know.
Right.
You talk about get me fired up. So whenever I see those sorts of things, and those are the things that will just kill a sales organization. They'll just kill the motivation of the team. They'll kill the productivity of the team. Whenever you have sales reps that are like, Friday's my office day because I have to get all my reports done. Yikes. I mean, you just lost 20% of your workforce just because you burdened them with too much administrivia, right?
Absolutely. So, and Mike, you talked about, that kind of splitting up of the non-selling activities. So going in and what I like to do is just, hey, let's record it, right? Let's get it in broad buckets. And inevitably it comes up at about 125% of a week, right? So I say, just do it in percentages. And they're like 25, 20, all of a sudden it's like 100, gosh, I'm doing 125% of the work. I'm overworked. But, looking at that and what ends up happening is you get a couple things as the leader then. So you start building the trust and the account, with the team that you're the champion. So you talked about, hey, what else, makes a good leader? So you mentioned something earlier, accountability, and then I'll add championing. But the two of those do need to go together, and they actually work together very well. And my approach is I will be the team's champion, but I'm also going to make you accountable for what we need to achieve. But I will make things go away, and I will make things easier if you're telling me that that's what's going to increase your productivity and your output. I'll go to bat for you. And what I'm going to ask in return is that you hit these characteristics. And by the way, in order to know, you're going to have to put it in the CRM, right? So we're using now the output of the CRM, and most of the time CRMs are in there because nobody, they just don't know. Nobody knows or those companies don't know what they're trying to measure because there's no plan and there's no goal, right? So we're kind of going back again, goal, what is it going to take to get there? How do I know whether I'm, on track? All those things provide your sales KPIs, your leading indicators, because I don't want to end up at the quarter saying, oh, we missed last quarter. And I'm sure there's several business owners that are out there that are looking at, tying up month end or quarter end, trying to understand whether or not we're, did we hit, did we not? Well, you want to know that because you want to have that question about, well, did that last contract come in? Are we going to hit the goal? I could have told you 3 months ago that we weren't going to overachieve by 100,000 because we have a forecast. So by being able to have the accountability and the champion, and then back to that topic, you're able to build trust with the team. You give them something, but what you're doing is you're creating I would call it an implicit contract, but it's actually an explicit contract that says, I'll go to bat for you if you, do what I need you to do, because here is the perspective. Here's what we're all trying to achieve. Here's the company's goals. Here's how we're going to go there. And here's how we're signed up for it. And if you tell me there's no way that's going to happen, then we'll have a conversation about it. And I'll say, well, let's figure it out, because we're in sales, right? We take goals, and we take goals that we're not happy with, and we motivate the team to figure out ways that we're going to achieve it, because we're not going to sandbag, but sometimes we can't change the goal that we've gotten, and we got to go figure out the best way to do it with the resources that we have. Let's get innovative. Let's get scrappy. That's what I want the team to be doing. And so in order to get that extra effort, that accountability, and that the championing, that's just kind of goes hand in hand. Those are just, other areas that I would really make sure, you've got in a leader. And very much what ends up happening, if you don't have a sales leader, you don't have accountability. So who's minding the shop, right? Who's making sure we're going to hit it? A lot of those owners that I hear from, they say, well, I hope we're going to hit this next quarter. I hope we're going to hit this by the end of the year. That is my number one red flag. It's like, well, hope's not a strategy, right? We've heard it, right? Hope's not a strategy. And it's not in Salesforce. It didn't happen. There was a couple of things that, that you hear a lot, but, they're true. And there's some context, behind those.
Yeah, that's why you hear them so often, is because there's some fundamental truth behind them all. Well, look, Mike, we could talk about this forever. I knew we'd get into it. I got about halfway through the questions I wanted to ask you. So, so that's also, maybe we'll do it again down the road. But look, thanks so much for joining me today and sharing your insight with us. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you if they want to have a conversation with you?
Sure. I'll give my email address is mike@bedrocksales.com. Also, you can hit me up on LinkedIn. That is an area that if you go to Mike Dowhan, you'll see my profile there. Connection requests, requests to chat. Those are always great. Also, my website, www.bedrocksales.com, will get you to my landing page over with my sales acceleration partnership. Always interested in exploring and chatting. And, what I'd like to discuss when somebody reaches out is really, let's understand what's going on, and let me see if I can help you. And you know what, if I can't, maybe I know somebody who can, meaning it may be a marketing issue or a finance issue. I really have a strong network of partners that, we, work together, and we're always on the outlook for each other. And it really just fuels me personally to be able to provide guidance and assistance in any way I can, even if it's not through my personal contribution there. If I can introduce you to somebody, I'm always happy to.
Well, that's awesome. Well, thanks so much, Mike. And I'll make sure that all of your contact information is in our show notes. That'll be on our website attached to this episode, where we post it there. So thank you so much. Before I wrap up, I just want to take a minute to thank everyone who is new to the Big Three of B2B Leadership, who's been listening and following the podcast. It's really exciting to see the momentum building, and it's inspiring for me to continue to find great people to talk business growth with, like Mike. So if you like the conversation today, I'd be grateful if you could just give us a quick 5-star rating on iTunes, or leave us a review there. Taking a few seconds to give us a little extra love has a huge impact on our ability to reach more people with our content. So thank you very much for that. Thanks for listening, everyone. And remember, B2B leaders grow companies faster when they focus on the big three. Have a great day.
Pro Sales Connection is a sales and marketing firm that has been helping B2B companies grow faster since 2009. Learn more about our proprietary fastest path to revenue process for B2B companies. Experiencing the possibilities begins with a short 15-minute call. Schedule yours at www.prosalesconnection.com and click Get Started.